Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. This time we're going to be tackling those enigmatic figures from biblical accounts.
The Nephilim.
The Nephilim, you got it, and you've probably heard of them, but we're going to be exploring whether the giants in the Bible were actually these mysterious Nephilim.
Right.
And we've got some excerpts from a text that delves into the story of Goliath and his brothers, and we're ready to unpack some fascinating details you might not have considered before.
It's a question that has sparked debate for centuries, really.
Mm-hmm.
And this source material that we're looking at offers some really interesting new perspectives.
So let's start with the scene that everyone knows, the epic showdown between David and Goliath. You've probably heard the story.
Of course.
But the text we're diving into really paints this vivid picture of Goliath. It describes his height as over 9 feet, 9 inches tall.
Wow.
Yeah, just to put that into perspective, that's taller than most basketball players.
I mean, that's incredible, just the sheer size of this person.
Yeah, and the text doesn't just mention his height. It describes his armor weighing a whopping 125 pounds.
Just imagine trying to move in that.
I know.
It really gives you a sense of the sheer physical presence this guy has.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And then there's his weapons. You know, the source describes his spear shaft as being like a weaver's beam.
Wow.
Those massive wooden beams used in looms, and the head of his javelin weighed something like 15 pounds.
It makes you realize that this wasn't just a physical confrontation. This was psychological warfare.
Oh, absolutely.
For 40 days, Goliath challenged the Israelites, and the text really emphasizes the impact this had. He wasn't just trying to defeat them physically, he was trying to break their spirits.
And that's where young David enters the scene. A shepherd armed with just a sling and a few stones. And most people know the outcome. David slays Goliath with a single well-aimed shot. But here's where it gets really interesting for us. Could Goliath have actually been a Nephilim, a descendant of those sons of God and daughters of men mentioned in Genesis 6?
That's the question at the heart of this deep dive, right? There are a lot of different theories about who the Nephilim were. Some believe they were fallen angels who mated with human women. Others see them as powerful human leaders. Still others argue they were descendants of Seth, the righteous lineage, who intermarried with the sinful lineage of Cain.
It's a bit of a puzzle.
It really is.
But what's fascinating is that this text actually argues that Goliath was more likely a Rephaim, not a Nephilim.
That's right. It suggests that the Nephilim were probably wiped out during the Great Flood, so it's unlikely they would have been around in Goliath's time. The text then connects the Rephaim to another group of giants mentioned in the Bible, the Anakim, and it's worth noting that Goliath was from Gath, which was a major Anakim center, according to this text.
So what were the Anakim like?
Well, the text points out that they were known for their immense size and strength, and they were often described as fearsome warriors. They were said to be descendants of the Nephilim, but as we've already discussed, this source argues against that lineage for Goliath.
Speaking of lineage, Goliath wasn't the only giant in town. The text tells us he had 4 brothers.
Oh, really?
Are you familiar with them?
I can't say that I am.
All right, well, you've got Ishbi-Benob Saph-Lami and a 4th brother who is unnamed, but described as having 6 fingers and 6 toes on each hand and foot.
Wow, 6 fingers and toes. That's a detail you don't forget.
Yeah.
The source material doesn't go into detail about whether this was a common trait among the giants or unique to this brother, but it certainly adds to the intrigue.
So these brothers, were they just as impressive as Goliath?
Oh, absolutely. The text describes each brother as possessing impressive weaponry and being a formidable presence on the battlefield, just like Goliath. But there's a key point here. Every single one of them was defeated by either David or his mighty men.
It almost makes it seem like Goliath's lineage was destined to fall.
It certainly raises some interesting questions about whether their defeat was simply a matter of military skill, or if there was a deeper, more symbolic meaning at play.
You might not be as familiar with Ishbi-Benob.
Probably not.
So let's dive into his story first. The text describes this giant wielding a massive bronze spear and attempting to ambush a weary David.
Oh, wow.
And the text says that David was exhausted from a previous battle, and Ishbi-Benob saw this as an opportunity to strike him down.
Sounds like a really dramatic moment.
It certainly was, but fortunately for David, his loyal nephew Abishai comes to the rescue, killing Ishbi-Benob and saving David's life.
What a relief.
Right. And that's where things take an interesting turn. The text reveals that after this incident, David's men made him swear an oath. They promised they wouldn't let him risk his life in direct combat again.
Wow.
They recognized his importance to their cause and vowed to protect him.
This oath really highlights the shift in David's role, wouldn't you say? He's transitioning from a warrior to a leader, someone whose strategic mind and inspirational presence are more valuable than his individual fighting prowess.
That makes a lot of sense. So what about the other brothers?
Well, we know Saph faced off against one of David's elite warriors, Sibbecai the Hushithite.
And what about Lami?
Lami is described as wielding a massive spear, much like his brother Goliath, which was also described as being like a weaver's beam. It seems like size and strength ran in the family.
So how did he meet his end?
He was defeated by another one of David's mighty men, Elhanan, son of Jair. And it's interesting to know that even though David wasn't directly involved in every battle, his forces continued to overcome these seemingly impossible odds.
It suggests a shift in momentum, maybe a growing confidence and skill among David's army.
I think that's a great point. And finally, we have the unnamed giant, the one with the 6 fingers and 6 toes.
Right.
He was defeated by Jonathan, the son of Shemaiah, who was David's brother.
It seems like defeating giants was a family affair.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's almost as if David's courage and faith became contagious, inspiring those around him to achieve these extraordinary feats.
It's remarkable that despite their size and strength, each of these giants fell to the Israelites. It makes you wonder about the significance of these victories, not just militarily, but maybe in a bigger sense.
That's what we'll be exploring next. We'll look at how the source material interprets the giants and those recurring themes of faith and courage that emerge. We'll also discuss how these battles ultimately serve to reaffirm the Israelites' belief in God. So we were talking about the victories of David and his men.
Right.
And you might be wondering about the significance of these events, right? Why do these stories of giants and their downfall resonate with us even today?
It's true. These stories have a way of capturing our imagination, and this source text suggests that it goes beyond just exciting battle narratives. It argues that these giants, particularly their ultimate defeat, hold a deeper theological meaning.
Exactly. It's almost as if these giants represent those massive obstacles we face in life. Those challenges that seem impossible to overcome.
We all have our own Goliaths to confront, don't we? Whether it's a personal struggle, a setback in our careers, or even those larger societal issues that feel overwhelming.
The text emphasizes this idea, suggesting that these giants symbolize those recurring trials and tribulations that test our faith and resilience.
So it's not just about literal giants, but about the metaphorical giants we encounter in our own lives.
That's a great way to put it. And the key takeaway, according to this source, is the message of resilience and vigilance. Just as David and his men had to stay alert and prepared for battle, we need to be ready to face those challenges head on.
But how do we do that, especially when those challenges feel so daunting?
Well, think about David. Despite his youth and lack of traditional weaponry, he never wavered in his belief that he could defeat Goliath. The text presents this not as arrogance, but as a deep-rooted faith in God's power. And that faith, it argues, was his greatest weapon. It allowed him to face a seemingly unbeatable foe and ultimately achieve victory.
So you're saying that even when we feel outnumbered or outmatched our faith, our belief in something greater than ourselves can give us the strength to keep going.
Exactly. It's about tapping into that inner strength, that unwavering belief that we can overcome even the most daunting obstacles. And remember, this isn't limited to a specific religious faith. It can be a belief in your own abilities, in the power of community, in the inherent goodness of humanity, whatever resonates with you.
That's a powerful message. It reminds me of that quote, "Faith is taking the first step even when you don't see the whole staircase."
I like that. It really captures the essence of what this text is trying to convey. And think about the impact of those victories, not just for David, but for the entire Israelite nation. Each victory solidified their belief, showing them that even when facing seemingly impossible odds, their faith could lead them to triumph.
It wasn't just about military success, it was about bolstering the spiritual foundation of a people.
Precisely. These stories weren't just about winning battles. They were about reaffirming a belief system, about finding strength and unity in the face of adversity.
It's interesting how these ancient tales still resonate with us today. The idea of facing our fears relying on our inner strength and overcoming adversity are themes that transcend cultural and religious boundaries.
That's the beauty of these stories. They speak to the human experience, to that constant cycle of facing and conquering our own personal giants. And just like the Israelites found strength in their collective faith, we too can draw strength from our communities, our support systems, and our shared belief in something bigger than ourselves.
So how do we apply this to our own lives?
Well, first, it's about recognizing those giants in our own lives. What are those challenges, those fears, those obstacles that seem insurmountable?
Once we've identified those giants, what's the next step?
The text points to the importance of cultivating courage and faith. Courage to face those giants head on, and faith, however you define that for yourself, to believe in your ability to overcome them. And remember, you don't have to do it alone, just like David had his loyal men. We all have people in our lives who can support us, encourage us, and remind us of our strength.
So it's about believing in ourselves, believing in something larger than ourselves, and never giving up in the face of adversity.
And that's a message worth remembering, especially in times when our own giants seem insurmountable. What do you think? Are there any giants that come to mind for you right now? Something you're facing in your own life?
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have.
From the epic battles of David and his men to the deeper theological significance of those victories. What stands out to you the most?
Oh, for me, it's the enduring power of these stories. I mean, we've been talking about giants and battles that happened thousands of years ago, yet those themes of courage, faith, and resilience still resonate with us today.
Right. It's like those themes tap into something fundamental about the human experience. We all face challenges.
We do?
We all have our own giants to overcome, and these stories, even if we interpret them metaphorically, offer a roadmap for how to approach those challenges. Absolutely. They remind us that we're not alone in those struggles, and they point to the importance of drawing strength from our beliefs, our communities, and our own inner resilience.
Right.
But let's go back to those Nephilim for a moment.
Okay.
We touched on the different theories about who they were, but the source text we've been examining doesn't offer a definitive answer. Does that ambiguity bother you?
Not at all. I think it adds to the intrigue. It allows us to engage with these ancient texts on multiple levels. We can explore the historical context, the mythological elements, and the spiritual interpretations.
So it's less about finding the right answer and more about the process of exploration and discovery.
Exactly. And that exploration can lead to some really thought-provoking questions.
Like what?
For example, if we entertain the possibility that the Nephilim were real, as some interpretations suggest, what does that tell us about the nature of the world and the possibilities of human history?
It opens up a whole new realm of possibilities.
It does.
Were there other beings, other forces at play in the ancient world that we're only just beginning to understand?
It challenges our conventional understanding of history, biology, and even the nature of reality itself. It's like peeking behind the curtain of what we think we know and realizing that there might be a far more complex and mysterious world out there than we ever imagined.
So we've explored the epic battles, the lineage of giants, the theological symbolism, and the enduring mystery of the Nephilim. It's been a fascinating journey.
It really has.
Wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And hopefully it's left you with more questions than answers,
I think so.
because that's what keeps
Yeah.
us curious, keeps us exploring, and keeps us engaged with these ancient stories.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you'd like our listener to take away from this exploration of the Nephilim and the stories of Goliath and his brothers?
I'd say this: don't be afraid to question, to challenge your assumptions, and to explore different interpretations. The world is full of mysteries, and sometimes the most rewarding journeys are those that lead us into the unknown.
Well said. And remember, those giants in your life, those challenges that feel insurmountable, they might not be as formidable as they seem, just like David. You have the strength, the courage, and the resources to overcome them. So keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep. The world is full of fascinating stories waiting to be discovered.